I'm going to regret this.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
It's a jingle-jangle morning here at Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that is trying to bring just a little bit of cheer to you at this time of year. I'm one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and I'm joined on this merry mixer of a podcast by my dear friend, my compatriot, my fellow Jedi Master, Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you ready to get silly with today's topic?
I absolutely am ready for that.
And I'm absolutely ready for people to go ahead and give us a review at Apple Podcasts. If it's not the worst podcast you've ever listened to, why not give us a 5? Be fun. Be silly. And you, of course, can reach out to us online at the Jedi Masters on X and at Join Nerd Party for the network on X and the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And if you can find our TikTok account, please let us know because we don't have one. Anyway, all right, Matt. So we are here at, we're recording at the most magical time of the year for many. And I had another one of my silly topics come to mind. We've talked about a couple of different things, but I wanted to get your take on something here. I recently encountered the live action version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Not a fan particularly, but it put me in the mind to think about the Grinch.
Okay.
And I suddenly realized that there's sort of like a two-part thing here. One, is Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi simply the Grinch on Mount Crumpet? And two, my other favorite movie to watch at this time of year is any version of A Christmas Carol. And we know that at the core of A Christmas Carol is a visit by everybody forgets Marley, by 4 different ghosts who basically kick Scrooge in the spiritual head and say, wake up, bro. You're kind of screwing things up right now. And given where you and I differ about the presence and function of Force ghosts, shouldn't we be able to get some sort of Christmas Carol-esque story from Luke? So attack either one of those. Those are the two thoughts going around in my brain right now.
I think that's actually a really interesting idea. The ghosts of Jedi past, present, and future coming to visit Luke on Octu, and the whole, like you saying that, I'm thinking this really could be, a fun. It almost feels like it would be a very fun, like fan fiction almost type story to have happen between The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker, almost where Luke has made it to the netherworld of the Force, and then he's visited by the Force ghosts who let him know, you didn't do such a great job there, bro. And so then when he, of course, meets with Rey in the Rise of Skywalker, he seems to be singing a whole different tune. And, so I think this actually is the perfect way to kick off this conversation because it also ties into our conversation about a holiday special. And this seems like the perfect holiday special to do.
I think it would be a great holiday special. The only unfortunate thing is to stay, quote unquote, within canon. Of course, you're right. The visit from the 3 ghosts would have to happen basically in the world between worlds. I mean, Ahsoka has this sort of experience with the ghost of Anakin in the Ahsoka series. He plays a singular role, but he takes her through her past, and she has to deal with her present to overcome her fear of the future, which is the journey that Scrooge goes on.
Exactly.
So we have precedent now. I just think it's such a missed opportunity because since we have established now with the sequel trilogy, if we are going to accept that as further expanding what Force ghosts are capable of, one would think that they could have crossed over into the land of the living to set Luke right before everything went wrong. But I'm willing to accept your interpretation. But which 3 Force ghosts? Because the only 2 Jedi he encounters personally, I mean, I guess Anakin would have to be the third one. Those would be his 3 Force ghosts, right? But it would have to kick off somehow.
You know, I think that you might actually just kind of get it in the framework of the Jedi that Luke knew. So you would have Obi-Wan first, you would have Yoda second, and, you know, then you would have Vader / Anakin being the third, you know, Anakin being the one who kind of brings everything home. And, you know, what I think makes this actually the most interesting as an actual story idea is because of the way in which they've dealt with Anakin in the Ahsoka series. And, you know, the fact that this whole experience allows Ahsoka's experience with Anakin, the things she learned from Anakin, and the things that she's been holding on about herself to, in many ways, be redeemed, right? She can now see the forest and the trees and distinguish between the two, and see the good, the bad, the ugly, the great, you know, all the things that were actually beneficial. And I think she can more rightly see herself now and the ways in which, you know, she is not Anakin. She will not turn into Anakin, and mainly because throughout her life, you know, she's made different decisions. And so I think the opportunity then for Luke to have this experience, and I think, you know, you bringing this up just kind of brings to mind my whole frustration in general with the fact that I don't know if it's necessarily a terrible idea to have Luke struggle, but we knew that one of the main reasons to transition to a Force ghost is that ability to be able to impact future generations, because you can come back, right? We saw that happen. I mean, and I'm not just basing this on my opinion. Like, you see that happen because we know that it's Qui-Gon who contacts Yoda, puts him on this journey. Then Yoda puts Obi-Wan on this journey. And then, you know, Obi-Wan, of course, puts Luke on this journey. And so, and in some ways, you know, we also see that somehow Anakin has found his way into this journey. So there's so much, I think, here that the idea of Force Ghosts really allows us to be able to, you know, learn from the past. And, you know, with the Obi-Wan show showing us that, you know, they're always there. You just have to be willing to see them. I think that this idea with Luke is just so rife for storytelling, but it also frustrates me in some ways that it was never used just in the sequel trilogy in the first place, because it also seems like this would have been a thing that would have been incredibly beautiful and powerful, and talk about ways of bringing the entire series, you know, together. I just don't, you know, when you talk about prequels, original trilogy, and sequel trilogy, I can't think of many better ways to bring all of it together.
A couple of things going off of what you're talking about there is with the past, present, future. It's interesting because encounters with Force ghosts is a consistent thing, and additionally, you have a situation where one of my favorite versions of A Christmas Carol, Alec Guinness actually plays Marley. So that's pretty great. But I think the first person that Luke would encounter as a spirit would be like evil. The evil side would be Darth Vader, because it's sort of like he's, you know, the evil spirit never truly gets out. Marley never really gets out, but he buys a chance for Scrooge to do it.
Right.
And additionally, the way that Dickens describes the three ghosts that then visit Scrooge is the ghost of Christmas past is a little bit sad, is, you know, is the torchbearer. The ghost of Christmas present is obviously a little silly, a lot of fun. Everybody loves that character, but has a very deep, somber knowledge. And then the ghost of Christmas future is about everything that you fear. So that could even tie into the way Ahsoka encountered Anakin in the world between worlds, is she's afraid she's going to become him. And because you're reflective of where you came from, and that's how it all plays together. But what I think is really something to hold on to with it is this idea also, you could have it happen after Luke has transitioned over into the spirit realm. you can say, well, why would it happen then? One of the lessons could be that time sort of means nothing after a certain point. Time is how this crude matter, if you will, not the luminous beings, encounter reality. Time is just the way we understand the eternal. And that could be a lesson in and of itself. And that's a lesson that I think fits right in with Star Wars. We even know Lucas was playing with that idea. And it's one of those things where I think that I'd be very interested, because, of course, we know that they're working on a Rey movie. I would be very interested to see how Rey encounters the spirit world. Would she encounter Kylo? Would she encounter Luke? Would anybody come back and talk to her? But I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm still trying to keep it sort of, light and everything. But it really does demonstrate how they didn't really think through Force ghosts in the sequel trilogy. Regardless of whether they change rules, whether they keep the same rules, anything like that, they were just more convenient story point to throw in there when they needed it. They're sort of like a plot accelerator more than something substantive.
As you were talking, I was just thinking, in the old EU, they had come up with rules for themselves about Force ghosts because they didn't want them to be a crutch. And, therefore, the way they handled them was they kind of set a time limit. Like, there's only so much time in the physical world that they can manifest themselves, and after that, they go the way of wherever they go. And so they had come up with some rules about that, and I think you talking about that idea of that just not really necessarily you thinking it through all the way. Just reminds me of one Meet the Robinsons with the T-Rex. I got a big head and little arms, and I just don't think anybody thought this through. But I do think that was the case with Force ghosts, and it maybe in some ways, and this could possibly be the case. Maybe they were just afraid really to touch it, and they just, what do you do? But all that said, I think. It's interesting that this question has kind of led us back to the previous question of this does kind of seem like the way in which you could do a holiday story and a holiday special that really truly does fit in with the spirit of the season that we're in, as human beings on this planet. But also, I think in a way that truly fits in with the spirit of Star Wars and makes it feel, I think, kind of real and all of that. So I'm just like, Disney, are you listening?
Well, let me flip it on its head. Even let's keep silly, and I do want to double back to the Lucas Grinch thing because I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm not going to let go of that one, but. When you come in here and you're talking about, okay, Luke encounters we have sort of like a Christmas special sort of thing. Wouldn't even Palpatine be given the same sort of shot? Wouldn't he have the same sort of gatekeepers come? Wouldn't there be an obligation, even if it's Mace Windu showing up and saying like, hey, bro, listen, you kind of screwed the pooch on this one. Is there something about the evil characters that we don't, especially Sidious, where we don't want to give them this out? Like, would Sidious's be the ghost of Snoke, the ghost of Mace Windu, the ghost of, I don't know, who else? Plagueis would have to show up. Plagueis would be his Marley, right? Plagueis would be like, all right, we're going to have a really long discussion right now to go through that one moment, if Palpatine was telling the truth. But, I don't think they've discarded James Luceno's book yet. But yeah, like, would you accept a sort of dark side version of this? Maybe we'd set it at Halloween. It's our Nightmare Before Christmas version of this. Would you accept that? I think that Lucas has said, if I remember correctly, somewhere that the reason that, Sith wouldn't even want this in the first place. True. Very true.
Because they're so, wrapped up in the material. They don't care about anything spiritual, and the only reason they care about the Force is an attempt to continue to have power in the here and the now. They don't care about anything else. And so, I think that's the one thing where, they kind of chose their fate. It's the same. I think of C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, where he helps explain hell as being the very thing that people have asked for their entire lives, right? And so, in some ways, for the Sith, what they've asked for is to care only about this existence. And so if there is any existence past them turning becoming part of the Force in the end of their lives, that I can't imagine that they could be given any choice other than to basically be tortured for what they've done to the galaxy,
Well, maybe the torture is that the Force ghosts don't stop.
Oh,
right? The Sith for all eternity.
Yeah.
Those ghosts show up and
continually haunted.
Well, maybe there's like a rotation too, so that they don't get tired of it. Where it's like, all right, who's got this shift? Who's got this millennia off trying to talk to this Sidious character down there?
Yeah.
Fine, I'll take it. Whatever. It's eternity. It's fine. I think that yes, it's very true. The Sith, and I like your call out to the Great Divorce there, because everybody in that, they choose to go. There are people who they choose to go back because it's what they chose.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how many opportunities you give them. So what I almost wonder is, though, if you could turn it into having just one representative story of a flip side of it. Like maybe you could do these two ideas in sort of like a Tales of the Jedi sort of six episode series.
Yeah.
Where you have each one encounter and you see how Luke plays it. And then you get the Sith take, where basically at the end, somebody like Sidious is like, no, I don't want it. I don't want peace. I want to go back. I'm going to try to find any way to go back. And then guess what? We just backed our way into an excuse for how somebody like Sidious finds a way to come back from death, because he has forever to work on it, and he's going to find his way to squirrel through the gate or something like that. And just, find that, I mean, he's doomed to get defeated again and thrown, back into the pit, as it were.
Right.
But that, I think, could be even an interesting sort of thing.
I feel like that's the kind of thing where those are the type of places where it's really interesting to play. But for something like the Infinity type comics, where you've got these alternate type of ideas and you're kind of really playing with that. Or in some ways, we've talked about on the show before Star Wars Visions, right? It just almost seems like that's a great place for.
Ooh, it is.
Star Wars Visions to kind of play with this. If somebody had this idea, that would be the type of place that you would want to play with this idea, because you could do that because you're not bound to anything other than Star Wars, and that's even tangential at that point, with some of the things we have seen in that series. True. So this is, I think almost a perfect idea for that.
Yeah, I'd even love to play with the idea of, at some point in the distant past, that part of the Sith regimen was burning that spirituality out of someone. Like, you don't truly ascend to Sith until you burn that spirituality out, and that's the mistake Palpatine makes, is Anakin's never fully converted.
Yeah.
Anakin is, Anakin converts and Anakin becomes evil. There's no doubt about that. But his heart isn't in it the way that Darth Maul's would be, or even, honestly, the way Darth Tyrannus's wound up being. So,
it's very true.
Even Dooku in the Afterworld. Ooh, Dooku would maybe be one of Sidious's ghosts. But I think Dooku's appearance would be more along the lines of, listen, we're both in hell, but I might as well talk to you because it gets boring. That sort of thing. But to close it out, right, I do want to come back. Do you think that we could have a 30-minute animated special with music where Luke Skywalker on Act 2 is the Grinch?
Yeah.
There you go. You have it,
not?
folks, right there. He finally accepted one of
why
my
not?
ideas. It's one of the greatest Festivus miracles of all time. Matt went along with one of my crazy ideas. So I'm going to bow out at this point because it doesn't get any better than this. Matt, so that people can rain accolades upon you for being my co-executive producer on this 30-minute special with Luke as the Grinch, where can they reach you online?
Well, of course, you can find me all over the place on social media under the name Matt Rushing02. Here on the network, you'll find me doing Outpost with Drake Kaufman, as we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series. And over on the TFM network, doing a bunch of shows. Of course, the 602 Club. You can find all the franchises we love in one place. You can also find Literary Treks, The Orb, Warp 5, and The Artificial Tango. And John, when people are, not trying to figure out exactly what you're talking about online, where can people find you?
Nobody can figure that out. To quote a line from Die Hard with a Vengeance, not even God knows what I'm doing. So you can find me as Kessel Junkie, KESSELJUNKIE. You should know how to spell it by now if you've been listening for any length of time. And you can find me actually co-hosting a show here on the network called House Lights with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser, where we look at the work of directors. It's a film podcast. Shocker. But with that said, I hear the bells ringing for a Jedi Carol. That's what we're going to call it, a Jedi Carol.
Yes.
Back at the temple. So, Master Rushing, I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.